Welcome to the Made for Agriculture podcast. Today's host is Adam Jones.
All right, folks. Well, welcome to another episode of the Made for Agriculture podcast. My name's Adam Jones. We are without Cameron and part of the team this morning. Some of them are on summer vacation, so hope they're out there having a good time, staying cool, and maybe they went somewhere outside of the humidity that is the Midwest here lately. So anyway, appreciate you, everybody, jumping on and listening this morning, and appreciate Craig, Jesse, and Scott, who are not on vacation this week, jumping on the call this morning, kind of discuss our current crop conditions and what's going on. So just in case you wonder, we're recording this on July 25th of 2025. So kind of coming towards the end, or at least rapidly approaching kind of the end of a lot of our applications anyway. But these guys are going to give us some good disease updates and what's going on. So I think first off, let's kind of slide down to the Delta, and we'll let Mr. Jesse Surface kick it off this morning.
Morning, Jones. Well, first off, true agronomists don't take vacations in the summertime, so we'll just throw that out
Fair.
there.
Fair. No, you're not just throwing it out there, Jesse. This actually is recorded, so it's in the records now.
But yeah, no, we were kind of talking earlier. Things are really slowing down this week. I mean, granted, I still got stuff spread out from things that are B3, B4 up to R5, but in general, we're taking a big slowdown this past week. Herbicides I'm pretty one more week of spraying herbicides, and it's going to wrap up, and it's really just hitting some stuff twice, some stuff once. It's all just depends. It's kind of, we're going to have weeds in places, and it is what it is. I'm just going to have to deal with it. The big thing we noticed this week is southern rice made a big jump north. We're getting it all the way up almost to Perryville in places. And it's all in acres that did not get Tribacro on it. So just keeping that in mind for everybody. Like if you've got late planted corn, if it's just now tasseling or going to tassel yet, Tribacro application is a must. It's not a want. It's a must. Just do it. And Tribacro is, we've seen it year in, year out. Guys use different things, but Tribacro, once we see southern rust, it is the best. So don't skip. Don't try to pull something to save some money. Just do it and be done. And I do want to put a timing on there. It's been a while since we messed with bad southern rust, but if my memory serves me, like Mississippi State come out with something that says all the way out to like 50% milk line. If you have southern rust, you still need to control it. There's benefit there in controlling it out to even that late. So just kind of keep that in mind. Then I'll make a switch to kind of beans. We're starting to see frail guy, but it's very varietal dependent. So, I mean, we're still making fungicide applications and fungicide racks as we go for timing for Maribus or whatever you want to use. But if you know your varieties well and you can look at, you may be able to. I still don't like not doing fungicide, but you can kind of have that argument if you want to. But certain varieties we're seeing it in, certain varieties we ain't. So just keep that in mind. Irrigation is picking up a little bit, but really it's just scattered rain still. So we're just kind of irrigating where we need to. But I was listening to Snodgrass yesterday, and he's kind of acting like we may go into a dry spell here. So just kind of, everybody kind of keep that in mind. We're going to cool off at least, so I'll take that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think everybody would take that. Our temperatures haven't been extremely high, but man, with the humidity levels, at least up here, it feels like a gajillion degrees out there. So no, good stuff, Jesse. I think that's a good call out to you on the weed thing. You just kind of going to have what you have. I know, for years, it's always like you just went back and cleaned up and went back and cleaned up until it was all beans and you didn't see a single weed in the field. And there's a time where we've had so many rains that kind of, have broken stuff through residuals and stuff this year that there's a time where you just kind of have to draw the line and say, like, I mean, you're definitely hurting yield by doing that. So it is what it is. All right, let's switch it up this morning. We usually go in geographical order, but let's move straight to the other corner and let Craig give us an update from North Missouri.
Yeah, good morning. It's been a good week. We've had pretty good rainfall up here this past week for kind of most of the area, and over on the western side of Retail North, we have a little bit more precipitation there yesterday. I think everybody's going to get a pretty good shower kind of here over the end of the week, so tomorrow. still doing a lot of fungicide applications in soybeans. So that's happening. I know there's been a lot of guys that have been kind of trying to get across their field with a ground sprayer, and conditions just haven't really allowed for that. So I know that was one thing I really kind of wanted to touch on this morning, is just making sure that we're not kind of sacrificing, trying to get across it with a ground rig to be able to, I mean, just switch that application up, get an airplane or a drone or a helicopter kind of coordinated there to where you can get that application made, because the timing of that soybean fungicide is going to be more critical than trying to get across it with a ground sprayer. So everybody kind of gets all worked up about the coverage just because the difference in carrier volumes between the two can vary quite a bit. But biggest thing is just getting that on there when the soybeans actually need the protection. So that was kind of the one thing. I mean, we're really not seeing a whole lot as far as soybean disease pressure. I know John over there on the far western side of the state, up against the river, he's been finding a little bit of frog eye kind of as well. Just like Jesse mentioned, I think a lot of that's probably variety dependent. But something to be aware of anyway. So kind of get out there and be looking at some of those fields and be scouting to see you're aware of what's going on. So stink bug numbers are kind of starting to pick up in some of these soybean fields just a little bit. Kind of like to talk about those because I think most folks really just don't have a good grasp on what stink bug pressure looks like in a field. They go out there and they're kind of looking for the leaf feeding and defoliation, and that's just not how stink bugs cause problems. So they've got those piercing, sucking mouth parts, and they'll feed on soybean pods and seeds. So you really are out there just trying to look for densities and get a gauge on that. So our consultants use sweep nets to do that, but you know, most farmers don't have one of those just laying around their shop that I'm aware of. So if you're out there walking through soybean fields and seeing several of those stink bugs present, probably a good idea to make that application. Corn's kind of wrapping up pretty quick. I think a lot of our corn up here is now R3. Some of that really early corn's pushing R4. So we're kind of in that milk to dough stage. You can find southern rust there after this past week and in just about every field in northwest Missouri, and I sounds like it's fairly prevalent on the eastern side of the state as well. Tar spot maybe hasn't been as big a player, but I know there's some varieties out there that it is starting to kind of blow up in just a little bit. So we're kind of getting towards the later end of when we like to make those fungicide applications. I mean, ideally, we like to kind of see those go on, BT to R2, but with some of the disease we are seeing in corn, you can kind of like Jesse had alluded to there. You can justify some of those applications pretty late and still see a return for your investment. So just things to kind of be aware of. Physoderma has been pretty prevalent this year as well. So that's going to be kind of a concern as we get into late season with some stock crop potentially. But we've got consultants out there in the field that are going to be kind of watching for that and monitoring that stock integrity as we roll into harvest. So that's kind of what we got going on up north.
Yeah, Craig, it seemed like it hit I'm going to ask, I guess I'll ask you about this and anybody can give me comments, but kind of hit the mainstream press, if you will. And for those of you that are just listening, I'm making air quotes with that. Some of our pollination issues in corn. Have you seen any of that, Craig? And kind of what are some of your thoughts on kind of causes overall?
Yeah, I mean, it's present and we've seen some of it. I mean, there's kind of some varieties in particular that some of that pollination issue is being talked about, I guess, specifically. My biggest thing would just be get out there and scout, because, I mean, there's one pioneer number in particular that's been having a little bit of trouble, but it seems to be associated with that earlier planting date up here anyway, that first half of April. If you got that corn put in pretty early, it's having more issues than some of the later stuff. I mean, I looked at some corn that was planted it'd be kind of that later half of April yesterday of that number of concern, and pollination looked fantastic and looks like it's got some really good yield potential. So biggest thing is just get out there and be scouting. Make sure you know what you got. So, but kind of that rapid growth syndrome is that we'd seen kind of earlier in the season is they believe is kind of related to a lot of these pollination issues we're seeing now. I'll kind of let Scott dive into that one a little bit too, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I guess one thing I would add to Craig is don't push the panic button over some photos that you see on social media either. I think you can go on the outside row or in the outside corner of almost any cornfield and find a rough looking ear and take a picture of it, put it on social media if you want to. But that doesn't mean that from a field level perspective, you actually had an issue. So Scott, I don't know if that's a good transition or not, but I'll just let you go ahead and kind of give an update and let us know if you found anything kind of as well there in Central Missouri.
Yeah, I mean, we're aware of the issue and made our folks aware of it. Just and we've found some fields like that. I guess my biggest nearby concern, there's not a lot you can do about it if you're running that in your field. My concern was a lot of times we pull the trigger on fungicide as soon as we're, tassels are poking out and we kind of go ahead and start to get that on the books. And I really wanted to caution my team, if you're dealing with some numbers that there is concern about, let's make sure that thing's pollinating before we, put more expense into it and go that route. That was kind of the just, I guess, kind of on the ground practical concern that I had on the nearby. But yeah, it's the same as Craig. I mean, it's been a situation in some cases, but in others it's, been perfectly fine. So, those things are kind of tough to track times as to why one field and not another, but, timing does appear to have, with limited data points, I guess you would say, the planting date definitely seems to have something to do with that. As far as just everything else going on in the region, I mean, the big thing this week has just been rains that were, at least to me, unexpected. I saw my dad Sunday and he said, "Man, we might get a half-inch of rain tonight." And, we ended up around home anywhere from, a couple inches to 8 inches. So, I mean, way off the forecasts and, more than we needed in some cases. Actually, the rain we're getting last night was needed just to wash some of the beans off and clean up some of the remnants from that big rain. Out west earlier in the week, it looked like they'd missed a lot of it where they've been drier anyway. But at least I haven't talked to anybody yet this morning, but at least according to the app that I kind of watched, it seems to be fairly accurate. Looks like kind of filled in some of those areas, and it looks like they may have got some big rains in some places. So I'll be interested to talk to those guys later on this morning. But I don't know, you get that kind of rain third week of July and ahead of a incredibly hot week. It's hard to. I mean, that's definitely the top of the news. Everything else, pretty much combination of what the guys have already mentioned. Corn disease. We've gray leaf's been the big one this year, but tar spot and especially southern rust are starting to kind of move ahead of it. So we've got plenty of stuff out there. My real concerns, we talked about this a few weeks ago, and I think Shannon brought it up, which is a good call out. I mean, by the time these things are usually, I mean, even with southern rust, a lot of years, the fields will get nasty towards the end, but it's usually really late. But we're gonna have a lot of corn that's just coming on, after those disease, that disease pressure has already been established in the area. So, if you've got late or extremely late planted corn, kind of like Jesse said, it's not a should I fungicide or anything. You need to fungicide, and you need to use a good quality fungicide. You need to focus on, the holes that you may have in a variety. But when it comes to, like say, tar spot and particularly southern rust, using a good quality fungicide and one of the 3 mode of actions is probably the way to go on those, and just protect that late crop, because we could see some yield losses that we're not used to, at least in the central part from tar spot in particular, just because it could be here so early. Echo what Craig said on the physoderma. That's typically one that we get a lot of questions about, because it's pretty easy to recognize, and it also can be raise concern about other diseases, be misidentified. We typically say, wow, that's just physoderma. Don't worry about it. It's not generally thought to be a yield robber, but it's heavy this year. And Craig made a good point the other day, and he brought it up just now. It can be the same pathogen can cause stalk rots, particularly when it's in the lower nodes, and so that's something to be looking for. If you're seeing that early move up and down the plant, and in the lower part of the plant, particularly around like V6, V7, those nodes, it seems like the literature I was reading pointed to, you could have issues with stalk rots. So far the fields I've been in, we're still plenty early, seem to be, fine still, but as we move later into the season, that stalk can deteriorate rapidly, and just be mindful of that. A little bit of everything insect wise in the beans. Any one species is not really hitting a threshold, but it's kind of a thing we talk about from time to time. You throw 4 or 5 species that are below threshold, and you throw them together, you have a lot of stuff going on there that's, we don't really have a multi-species threshold, so you got to kind of make those calls. But in most cases where the fungicides going out, insecticides going out as well, just you don't want to have the greenest field in the neighborhood and draw all the insects to it. And again, what Craig said, stink bugs are probably one of the most overlooked pests we have, including in corn. They cause a lot of early season corn injury, and really can't think of anything else off the top of my head, guys. That's kind of what's going on in Central.
No, that's good stuff, Scott. And yeah, your last comments there, I think being in the field and kind of talking to growers, there's a lot of people that spray for Japanese beetles, and I think your target is incorrect there on what's actually causing you financial damage. Walk through a field and find a few stink bugs, they'll do a heck of a lot more than your little party of Japanese beetles that are hanging out up on top of the leaf. But
well, and it's not a reason to spray, or at least not the reason we go out there, but a lot of times you'll pick up a lot of nymphs too, as you get later in the season, and that's kind of setting you up for next year. One thing, and I'm not going to go into a bunch of different products, but when you move into to stink bugs and excuse me, as well as some other insects, you have to be on the upper end of your rates a lot of times. A cutworm rate of a cheap pyrethroid is not going to do it. They don't like it. Had a really interesting one years ago where about a couple 100-acre field, they ran out of insecticide on the last 10 acres and went ahead and sprayed the herbicide, to get it on before the rain. Then I got a call, for just the corn, what's going on in the corn in this area. And basically what we kind of surmised is that the stink bugs, it wasn't necessarily killing them all with the rate that was going out as a cutworm, rate of pyrethroid, but boy, it sure did drive them into that refuge. And just every plant had stink bug damage. It was just incredible.
Yep.
So yeah, you got to, if you want to actually kill them, you got to make sure you have a proper raid and proper product as well.
I was going to say, move to a more modern multi-mode of action insecticide too, as another thing. I see a lot of cheap pyrethroids being used, and we've had the cheap fungicide discussion, but same thing. You get what you pay for on the insecticide too. So, but okay, guys, thank you very much. I think a lot of very, very timely information in there. Things to look for in the field for sure. Go look for stink bugs if you haven't sprayed yet. Go check your corn for pollination if you haven't done that yet. Just, I guess one thing on that too is, don't write it off. That pollination phase is longer than what you think it is too. So, you see a lot of people kind of slapping the panic button there as well with an extremely young ear. And it's like, yeah, that corn's still shedding pollen. There's still time to fill that ear in. So, but it's not bad to be out there looking at it. So, gentlemen, thank you very much for your time this morning. Scott, Jesse, Craig, appreciate you guys not being on vacation this week. Always look for a good opportunity to give Shannon a hard time anyway. So we'll continue to do that. So anyway, thanks guys again. Thanks to everybody for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thank you for listening to Made for Agriculture, brought to you by MFA, your whole farm solution.